Your yes means nothing if you can't say no. That sounds backwards, but consider the people you trust most at work. They're not the ones who say yes to everything. They're the ones who deliver on every commitment they make. That reliability is built on selective commitment. When someone says yes to everything, you stop trusting the yes. This tutorial covers the exact mechanics of saying no cleanly. Not the motivation, because you already have that, but the how. Most professionals understand in theory that they should say no more often. The problem isn't values. It's that they've never been taught the mechanics. So they default to yes, and then manage the fallout, the late delivery, the resentful work, the relationship that quietly erodes. Here's the thing. The fallout from a badly managed yes is almost always worse than the discomfort of a clean no. The conversation you avoided costs more than the one you had. Think about the most reliable people you've worked with. They're almost certainly not the ones who say yes to everything. The chronic yes-sayer gets relied upon the way an unreliable thing gets relied upon. People add buffer, check in twice, plan around them. Their yes has been devalued. That devaluation happens quietly, across dozens of interactions. The reputation sets long before they notice it. The relationship doesn't erode because they said no. It erodes because they said yes and behaved like someone who wanted to say no. The fear behind saying yes when you mean no is almost always specific, not a vague social anxiety, but a precise calculation. If I say no, they'll think I'm difficult. Or, this opportunity won't come back. Sometimes those fears are right, but they're almost never as predictable as people assume. The bigger problem is the waiting. You treat the cost of the no as enormous and the cost of the yes as manageable. That calculation is usually wrong in both directions. Here's the framing that shifts things. The yes that comes from fear isn't generosity. It's self-protection wearing generosity as a mask. You're not agreeing because you want to help. You're agreeing to avoid the discomfort of the conversation. That impulse is completely understandable, but it produces worse outcomes for everyone involved. The work gets done badly or late. The relationship takes a hit anyway, just a slower, quieter one. The kindest thing is usually the honest thing. The first mechanical rule is that short is not rude. Short is clear. I can't take that on right now is a complete sentence. Compare that to, I'm so sorry, I would absolutely love to help, but things are just incredibly hectic right now and I really wish I could. That's exhausting to say and exhausting to hear. The lengthy apology doesn't soften the blow. It signals your own discomfort, which the other person picks up on. A direct no is more respectful of their time. The second rule, you don't owe an explanation for every no. This is where most people go wrong. They believe a reason makes the no feel legitimate. But reasons invite negotiation. I'm too busy gets it'll just be a quick call. I'm not the right person gets you're the best person I know for this. I have a conflict gets what if we moved it? Every explanation becomes a lever. The clean no is a statement of fact, not a negotiating position. There's a legitimate version of the counteroffer. I can't do X, but I could do Y, and an illegitimate one. The legitimate version is when Y is something you genuinely want to do. The illegitimate version is when you're offering Y just to soften the no, and you don't actually want to do Y. If you don't mean the offer, don't make it. You've just created a second commitment you'll resent and a second disappointment when you underdeliver on it too. Timing might be the most underrated part of this. A no in the first 24 hours is just a no. It costs almost nothing. A no after you've half started the work, or after the other person has made plans based on your yes, is a crisis. The discomfort you're trying to avoid by waiting doesn't decrease with time, it compounds. Every hour you delay, the eventual conversation gets harder and more expensive. Think of it like a small crack in a wall. Catching it early is a repair, catching it late is a renovation. Say it early. Most people who say no feel bad about it. That feeling is real, but it's almost always mislabeled. There are two things it could be, guilt or discomfort. Guilt means you violated your own values. You did something you genuinely believe was wrong. Discomfort means someone is disappointed, and that feels bad. These are completely different states. When you decline a reasonable request from a reasonable person, you haven't done anything wrong. What you're feeling is discomfort, not guilt. This distinction matters because they call for completely different responses. Guilt calls for repair, an apology, a change in behavior. Discomfort doesn't require anything. It just has to be sat with until it passes. When people treat normal discomfort as guilt, they over-explain, backtrack, and eventually cave. Not because anything actually changed, but because they couldn't tolerate the feeling. Once you can tell the difference between these two states, you stop confusing "I feel bad" with "I did something wrong." There's one more layer to the guilt problem, and it's worth naming directly: the identity spiral. The guilt that shows up when you say no is often not really about the specific request. It's about who you think you are. A good colleague wouldn't say no to this. A generous person would help. That's your narrative about yourself, not an accurate read of the situation. What actually happened? You declined a request. The identity spiral is something you added on top of that. They're separate things, and separating them matters. Other people's disappointment is theirs to manage. That's worth saying plainly because it tends to land as harsher than it is. It's not callousness. It's a realistic view of what you can and can't do for another adult. When you say no to a reasonable request, you have not harmed that person. They wanted something and didn't get it. That's disappointing. But it's not a harm you're responsible for repairing. Accepting that is not the same as not caring about the person. It's a clear-eyed view of what saying no actually means. Saying no is hardest when the person asking has power over you. Your manager, your biggest client, someone whose opinion has direct career consequences. That's worth acknowledging plainly. The same principles apply, but the execution requires more care. The goal when saying no upward is not to refuse. It's to have an honest conversation about capacity and trade-offs in a way that makes the other person's decision easier, not harder. You're not resisting. You're giving them accurate information. The framing that works upward is no to the request, not to the person. Instead of "I can't do this," try "I want to get this right. If I take this on now, X and Y are going to suffer. Which would you prefer I deprioritize?" That shift changes everything. You're not unilaterally deciding. You're flagging a real constraint and inviting the person with decision authority to make the call. It signals engagement, makes trade-offs visible, and keeps the decision where it belongs. Here's what most managers actually remember: who flagged problems before they became crises, and who delivered badly without warning. Most professionals trying to avoid being seen as difficult get it exactly backwards. The reputation for being difficult is built by overcommitting and under-delivering, not by being transparent about limits. Delivering poorly, consistently, because you couldn't say no is a real career risk. A clean no, delivered early with visible trade-offs, almost never is. The manager who trusts you to be honest is better served than the one who's always surprised. The first practice step is simple. Say it within 24 hours. Not eventually, within a day of knowing. This alone restructures the cost of the conversation. The other person hasn't made plans yet. You haven't started work you'll have to walk back. The discomfort is still just the conversation itself, not the conversation plus the mess. Set one rule for yourself. If you already know the answer is no, say it today. The delay never makes it easier. It always makes it more expensive. The second practice step. Try saying no once without an explanation and observe what happens. Most people have genuinely never done this. Pick a low-stakes request you can't take on. Say, "I can't take this on right now," and stop there. Don't add because. Don't apologize at length. Just let the sentence stand. Almost certainly, the person will say "okay" and move on. What you'll realize is that the explanation was always for you, to manage your own discomfort, not for them. The no was enough on its own. The third step applies specifically when the ask comes from someone with authority. The next time a manager or client asks for something you can't deliver on without a trade-off, make that trade-off visible before you commit. "If I take this on, here's what slips. Which would you prefer I deprioritize?" You're not refusing. You're giving them accurate information they need to make a good decision. Most people who try this framing are surprised. The conversation they were dreading is shorter, calmer, and more productive than anything they imagined. Everything in this tutorial comes from a single article at Real Syllabus, The Art of Saying No Without Losing the Relationship. It covers all of this in more depth. The identity spiral that makes people cave, the mechanics of the legitimate counteroffer, and the exact framing that works with managers and clients. If this resonated, the full piece is worth 10 minutes of your time. Head to realsyllabus.com and find it in the Life Systems section. The professionals whose yes still means something learned exactly this.